All right, everybody, welcome back. It is Monday. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Time. I am Matt Lewis, and with me is Charlie the Great, Charlie Sykes. Charlie, I'm psyched to see you, my friend. How you doing?
Hey, it's 9 o'clock Central Time, just so you know. So
Yeah, we
so
do
we
this
are
early.
happy
We do
spring,
this.
by the way. This is the first time that you and I have spoken since spring blossomed. Mud
I am in the
season is actually
the
turning in.
short
Yeah.
sleeves. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, yeah. This looks like we have a lot of fall springs, but I think this is the real spring. Where do we start today, huh?
Well,
Um,
we got a lot. We got a lot to cover, but I am planning on doing a little trip for spring break. It shouldn't interfere with our doings here. But Charlie, airports, my friend, it is not looking good. I'm seeing lots of scary videos. I guess ICE is now being deployed, which raises the question: is ICE just Donald Trump's personal police force that he can reposition where he wants them, because it's obviously not doesn't pertain to immigration enforcement. But here's the big question. Maybe we should open with this. I'd love to get your take. Right. So there's an argument that says Democrats need to just fund DHS, forget the whole thing about ICE and not wearing masks and all of that, because the big story now is Iran. And God forbid if Iran were to unleash some sort of terrorism. We had an accident today at LaGuardia,
oh boy.
where a plane collided, I think, with a fire truck. Two
Mm.
pilots at least were dead the last time I looked, and a lot of injuries. If something, God forbid, tragic were to happen, especially if it's terror related, would Democrats then get blamed as opposed to letting Donald Trump own the whole Iran debacle?
Well, I think I'm sorry. Trump owns the Iran debacle, but he also owns this DHS debacle. There was a report in Punch Bowl News that suggested over the weekend, even Republican leader John Thune went to him and said, "Hey, that let's fund all the rest of DHS and leave ICE to the side." And Trump doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He wants, to continue to have these bogus votes on the SAVE Act and everything. So Donald Trump has a way of solving this TSA problem. He has the way of solving almost any of the other Department of Homeland Security issues, but he's choosing not to do that. And to your point about sending ICE agents to the airport, how is that supposed to make things any better? Except to raise the profile once again of the probably the most unpopular, most toxic agency of the Trump administration. So I think this is going to get worse. I understand your point about the Democrats, might get blamed. Of course, Republicans will try to blame them. That goes with the territory. But right now, I do think that they hold the cards, and I don't think they're in a position to back off right now.
Well, and also, I mean, the fact that Trump can just redeploy ICE to do whatever the
And they're not
important job
funded
of,
either, by the way. Remember, I
yeah,
mean, this is the
yes.
thing. The crisis is because we're not funding TSA and they're having to work without pay. Well, that's the same thing with ICE. So
Yeah,
why ICE? Why not
because
National Guard troops?
they're his
Why not?
paramilitary.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
did you see he sent out a truth telling them that they don't have to wear masks at the airport? Not, in fact, encouraging them not to wear masks at the airport. For what that's
Well,
worth.
he put out for a president in wartime, he put out quite a few bleats over the weekend. There's one that I actually don't want to have lost in the shuffle. I don't see a lot of commentary about it. I want to get to the Robert Mueller thing, obviously, because
Yeah, for sure.
I am still cranked up about that. But over the weekend, the president of the United States bleated. Well, I don't even know what do you call a truth social thing? I
And
call it a bleat.
well, tweets are called excretions.
Okay, this
Truths
is
are
an
truth socials are supposed to be called truths, but that's so Orwellian.
very Orwellian. So
Yeah.
he put out, now with the death of Iran, the greatest enemy America has is the radical left, highly incompetent Democrat Party! Exclamation point. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President.
Can you read that one more time, Charlie?
Now with the death of Iran, the greatest enemy America has is the radical left, highly incompetent Democrat Party. As Phillips O'Brien said, calling the opposition party the greatest enemy of a country is exactly what wannabe dictators do to justify seizing power. But so domestically, his political opponents now have replaced the evil regime of Iran as the greatest enemy. And by the way, there is no death of Iran; they're still there. It's still a problem. But just so we understand the mentality of this president right now, who's basically, I don't know, in some weird way declared war on half of the country of America.
But that's not new, and frankly,
No, it's not.
I'm surprised Democrats ranked second to Iran to begin with. Like, I think he has said
Mm,
before that
the real enemy.
that's the real enemy. The enemy within is more dangerous than the foreign adversaries. I'm pretty sure he's actually said that before. So you could look at
Yeah,
this as a good thing, Charlie. That Democrats have been downgraded to the second biggest threat facing America today.
they've just been re-promoted with apparently with the death of Iran, but it's giving you some idea of the mindset, the bitter, angry mindset of the president who. You and I pointed out 10 years ago that it was probably a bad idea to put a man with this sort of character into the Oval Office,
Yeah.
giving him control of the federal government, including the nuclear codes. We did suggest, I know that you and I both suggested that character was not irrelevant. A lot of the smart kids in the room were saying, no, 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 ignore the character. Let's just go with the policy wins. And have you noticed how many of them are now acting shocked after a decade of this shit, are shocked to find out, yeah, this is pretty bad. Donald Trump's character is not just mean tweets. It also actually has geopolitical implications. Yours did a
Totally.
great column about this
Oh,
week.
thank you.
I
Yeah,
am
no,
I am serving you a high lob here, Matt.
no, yeah. So my latest Substack is about this, and I kind of keyed off. Ann Coulter tweeted a line from Christopher Caldwell. Now, Christopher Caldwell, as I'm sure you know, is a formerly, I think he was at the Weekly Standard, highly regarded in terms of his intellect, sort of very literary minded person, but also little kooky right wing. He wrote a book that was pretty controversial a few years ago, essentially saying that the Civil Rights Act was the beginning of all of our problems, and that once you made exceptions for African Americans, um, then that opened the door to all sorts of special rights for all sorts of other people. And anyway, um, he recently, after a decade of Donald Trump, mind you, Charlie Sykes, put out a piece called "The End of Trumpism," and he writes. Having Donald Trump as president probably resembles being a heroin addict. You undergo regular episodes of sweating terror and mortal danger, and the end result of which is you get back, at best, back to normal. So I wrote this piece basically saying, why now, right? And so for him, the litmus test is obviously, or not the litmus test, but the impetus, the motivating
2021.
factor
Yeah.
here is the Iran war. And so let me just give you like one of the quotes from his
By the
piece.
way, having compared himself to a heroin addict, my suggestion is, Chris, maybe the answer to this is rehab or
Yeah.
quitting cold turkey, right? But go on because
Well, I mean,
he
and
has some thoughts about character. Yeah,
acceptance is step one, right? And so maybe he's
right.
getting there. But so what he said, like America did not expect Trump's character flaws to endanger them in the realm of foreign policy. And to which I say, like, number one, I'm an American. I thought it would, right?
Yes,
And
we
I
warned for
just
10 years.
Right. If someone is a liar, if someone is easily manipulated by flattery, if they're susceptible to flattery,
Yeah,
if someone sells out their friends, if someone attacks fellow Americans as the enemy,
fundamentally
don't be
dishonest.
surprised when they turn on you. And so, like Tucker Carlson, right? It's not in my piece, but like Tucker Carlson,
Mhm.
Joe Kent, all of these people who may have the force of the government coming after them now. Well, guess what? When he did that to James Comey, maybe that would have been a warning sign that this is the kind of person. So this is the kind of person who lie. If he's willing to, this goes back to the whole thing my mom told me when I started dating. Like, if she'll cheat with you, she'll cheat on you kind of thing, right? Like Donald Trump,
Mhm.
character, man. And you and I, going back to the Bill Clinton era, Charlie, said things like
Every conservative.
every conservative said character matters and that Bill Clinton's character, it's not, if he's willing to lie and to perjure himself about sex, does it end there? Is that it? That's the only
Well,
thing?
I mean, you wrote this. I mean, this really comes down to the fundamental, I think, central objection of never Trumpers from the beginning, which was that character was destiny. And as you point out, but if you believe, as many of us do, that character is destiny, and that people who are impulsive, self-interested, and easily flattered tend to be dangerous, then no Trump betrayal should shock you. So I'm reading in my newsletter today about Trump naivete syndrome, this belief that, oh, it's how bad can it get? There's really no risk here. But this line that he has here, that you cited, Americans did not expect Trump's character flaws to endanger them in the realm of foreign policy. Well, what? This is something that I said on my very, very last appearance on Fox News. Pretty much guaranteed that I would never be invited back to Fox News. I was on actually with Megan Kelly, who asked me, and again, this is back in 2016, says, well,
It was a
Charlie, why are
different
you not going to
world.
get on board? Why are you not going to get on board with Donald Trump? And this is what I said verbatim. For the Christopher Caldwells, who said nobody could have expected the thing would, go this, far off the rails. I said, Donald Trump is a serial liar, a con man who mocks the disabled and women. He's a narcissist and a bully, a man with no fixed principles who has the vocabulary of an emotionally insecure 9-year-old. So no, I don't want to give him control of the IRS, the FBI, and the nuclear codes. That's
Oh
just
my
me.
gosh.
Yeah.
You nailed it, Charlie. And this is 10 years ago. And the great Christopher Caldwell just now getting around to seeing that. This is a very smart guy. I think, and I mean, not that this makes him smart, but I think his father in law was Bob Novak. I think he was at the Weekly Standard a ton
He
of,
he he, he was
Bill
his
Kristol,
daughter,
Charlie,
yeah,
just
his
so
daughter
many
does
smart
marvelous
writers
stuff.
there.
Exactly. So in any way, I just think that this is one of those things where the naivete of Republicans who have constantly been either turning a blind eye, that well, they didn't hear it, they didn't see it, and to claim that they are surprised by this now, and maybe they've just simply been numbed by all of it. But the other point, and that you made this as well, Christopher Caldwell arguing that this is the end of Trumpism because people are really now they're going to realize this guy can't be trusted. Now they're going to realize that maybe he doesn't have the character and the virtues to be president. Um, there's no indication in the polls at the moment that the MAGA base has turned against Donald Trump. I mean, he's losing in almost every demographic group except among the MAGA, the MAGA, you know, base that is still overwhelmingly supportive of him and of Iran. So the other flaw of Caldwell's analysis is to believe there is such a thing as Trumpism. In his imagination, there was some sort of ideological coherence. The reality is that Trumpism has always been about Donald Trump, and it's always been at Donald Trump's whim. So the notion that, well, this is the end of this. No, have you been paying attention to the way that people were willing to flip their position on one issue after another, abandon one principle after another? That is the essence of
Yeah.
Trumpism. So I'm sorry. I know that everybody's kind of dumping on
Yeah.
Caldwell, but this whole, like who knew that he didn't have the virtues and the character to be president? There's a line, by the way, that you mentioned that I sort of got stuck on. He writes, listen to this. Okay, this is the smart guy. After 10 years of Trumpism, no one who witnessed Trump's bravery
Mhm.
after being hit with a would-be assassin's bullet in Pennsylvania in 2024 will doubt he has character. Okay. What kind of character? But his virtues are not the ones you need to run a free country. And then he acknowledges that the guy's a complete, liar and a crook.
Yeah.
Well, so what are these virtues that had misled the Caldwells of the world? You know, who was it who wrote that piece about the virtue? I'm trying to think. Somebody. Oh, you got somebody who had drifted off. I don't want to beat up on him, but talking about you can tell the man is a man of virtue. Seriously,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So can we now talk about the Mueller thing because this is in the context of all of this?
Definitely a good transition, right? I mean, Robert Mueller, Purple Heart winner, Vietnam vet. I think he went back to Vietnam after being injured, like on a, sort of voluntarily. Never mind his service as FBI director. I think it is sad, kind of the swan song, the way that he will be remembered with the Trump stuff. But just a
American
seemingly
patriot.
there you go. That sums it up. Versus, Captain Bone Spurs.
I think Matt's boot, wrote at one point during the investigation that Robert Mueller represented the best of America and Donald Trump represented the worst of America. And I was thinking over the weekend before we get to the insulting tweet, the asymmetry of all of that. That Robert Mueller was in some ways the last of a breed of people who really believed in the rule of law, who had this sense of integrity, who thought we're going to go by the book, and he was no match for this
Yeah.
feculent, lying narcissist in an age of political polarization. And it really was one of those breaking points because he represented something that we had thought this independent, legal justice system out here that would deal with it with their craft and their values. And of course, what did they encounter? They encountered Donald Trump and Bill Barr and all of that, and he was no match to that. But what a man, what a incredible career and what an incredible example. And he's being remembered by everyone who worked with him, with the exception of the sitting president of the United States, who put out,
Yes.
I
Robert
mean,
Mueller has just died. Good. I'm glad he's dead. He can no longer hurt innocent people! Exclamation mark. It's the same, similar to what he said about Rob Reiner.
yeah,
Just dancing on the graves immediately, and of course, flies in the face of something J.D. Vance said after Charlie Kirk died. When you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out, and hell, call their employer. So it seems like there's a double standard when it comes to
well, let's
celebrating
let,
people's
let,
murder
let, let's just spend a
or
moment
death.
on that because
Death.
yeah, the screaming hypocrisy with hair on it here, that the entire right decided to weaponize the death of Charlie Kirk. That if you posted anything that was not suitably, showing suitable grief, or you made light of it or anything, they were going to come after you. You would lose privileges. I mean, actual government policy that if you wanted to come into this country, they would look at your social media post. People were fired for all of this. Because what? Now you have the President of the United States on a regular basis dancing on the grave of people he does not like. And once again, MAGA has gotten so inured to this that is he going to pay any price for it? No. I mean, he has cultivated this cruelty again for the last 10 years. So did you see Scott Bessent on the
Yes.
Secretary of Treasury on Meet the
Yes.
Press?
He's not
Because
good at this, is he?
really, really not good at this. And Kristen Welker asked him, do you think it's appropriate for the President of the United States to celebrate the death of an American citizen, someone who was a Bronze Star Purple Heart recipient and who served in Vietnam? And then his answer is, Kristen, I was with the president in the green room at Davos, and there was a video playing of what may have been the illegal raid on his home at Mar-a-Lago. They were going through his wife's wardrobe, and I watched the look in his eye, and I think that neither of us can understand what has been done to the president and to his family. Okay, could we just have a fact check editor's note? Robert Mueller had nothing to do with that raid. He was long gone as special counsel. Scott Bessent, I don't know, I either knew that or whatever. Christian Welker did not correct him on it, but he refused to say a single word. The Secretary of Treasury, asked to say anything nice about Mueller, wouldn't do it. To find a scintilla of decency to push back, would not do it.
Yeah.
And
Never
quite
mind.
frankly, this is what Donald Trump has done to the culture and the
Yeah.
moving this window of disgusting behavior.
Absolutely. It's trickle down Trumpism,
Yes,
and it's
trickle down.
infecting everybody, and it will outlive Donald Trump, sadly. But let's also, I mean, everyone watching us and knows that this is true, but just it's worth a reminder that the reason that there was a raid on Mar-a-Lago is that Donald Trump kept secret documents and
Yes,
refused to relinquish them after given numerous opportunities and
multiple.
months of entries, entreaties attempting to get them back and to negotiate, wouldn't do it. That's why that happened. And then even the Mueller investigation, Robert Mueller did not decide to go after Donald Trump, but Donald Trump brought this on himself. I mean,
Right.
even if you want to write off the like P tape and all of that, um, Donald Trump said publicly, "Hey, Russia, if you've got Hillary's
If
emails,
you're
if you've got any
listening,
information, if you're listening," yeah. So Trump did that. That in and of itself, like if he had done that secretly,
yeah,
if we discovered a tape of him
no,
telling Russia that secretly, it would probably be considered like treason or something, or certainly breaking the law. Then Donald Trump's what was it? His family held a meeting at Trump Tower with Russians who were promising to deliver some sort of oppo on Hillary Clinton. Like that actually did happen. So there were, there were multiple things that happened that made it certainly reasonable for an investigation against Donald Trump to open, even if you think the Russia thing was overblown. It's not a hoax. And so this hatred aimed at Robert Mueller for honestly doing his job that the American people, we have a
Remember who
system of
appointed it.
justice.
Remember who appointed it. I mean,
Was
this
it
was not
Donald
the
Trump?
evil Democrat. No, it was Jeff Sessions. This
Oh,
was
right.
this
Yeah.
this was Donald Trump's own conservative Republican attorney general who appointed Robert Mueller. The Democrats had nothing to do with the
Yeah.
appointment of Mueller.
And Mueller
And
had
again,
worked
that was the end of
for,
Jeff Sessions, basically.
and I think Mueller had worked for George W. Bush. He had worked for
Yeah,
Barack Obama. He obviously
yeah,
worked for the Trump administration in that
yeah.
capacity. Was a bipartisan guy, not some crazy
No,
left wing activist or something like that. And so if you do your job, and fulfill your responsibility, then if Trump will get rid of you. And so there are plenty of Iranian experts who have been like doged or whatever, gotten rid of because they were involved in things that Donald Trump didn't like, by virtue of probably his behavior.
right. Well, can we go back to Mueller? Because I have a controversial opinion on all of this, which was the Russia story was not, in fact, overblown. And in fact, as time goes on, the mystery of Donald Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin deepens. It is not going away. Um, and so you go back, and I agree with you. I mean, I remember when this was ongoing. What struck me was if nothing untoward had happened, why so much lying? Why was there so much lying about that Trump Tower meeting? Why were there so many sketchy contacts involving, Paul Manafort and others? And Donald Trump has made it clear over and over and over again that he wanted Russian help digging up dirt on his political opponents. Remember, his first impeachment, resulted from his attempt to extort Volodymyr Zelensky to give him dirt on the Biden family. Keep in mind, that how far he was willing to go to have, foreign adversaries dig up dirt. So, he's on that phone call. He basically seemed to make, the provision of weapons contingent on digging up dirt. Later, after Vladimir Putin launched his war against Ukraine. And I'm just kind of amazed this kind of got lost in the shuffle. He gave an interview where he specifically said was out of office, saying that right now I'm guessing that Vladimir Putin doesn't have any love for the Biden administration, so this would be a good time for him to dump all kinds of negative stuff on
Mm,
Joe Biden, which I thought was as close to treason as you could possibly get. At a time when you have this war had just begun, Donald Trump was once again appealing to Putin to help him out politically by giving him dirt. So the entire predicate of the Mueller investigation was there Russian interference in the 2020 election? I think there's no question that there was. The return on investment has been amazing. The idea that, what was the word that we kept using? That he was supposedly investigating. It wasn't actually a crime. The collusion. Was there some sort of collusion? Well,
right.
there was not a specific crime, but there was a there there. The Russia hoax was not a hoax in any way, as we should have learned in the
Yeah.
years since then.
Well, the fact that it didn't take down Trump and the fact that he keeps using the term Russia hoax
Mhm.
over and over and over again feeds the impression that it was a total nothing burger. And I think there's a spectrum that perhaps it comes down, but clearly there was something there that was untoward. And look,
There's still something there.
I've supported Trump's
We don't
impeachment.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember when he took Vladimir Putin's word over the U.S. intel
Yep.
assessment publicly? So it's just, yeah. And it's, to your point too, Charlie, and look, there are examples of people who act guilty when they're not, but Donald Trump, he wouldn't have acted any differently if he were certainly an agent of Russia or if they had compromise. I mean, his behavior
Yep.
would have been basically identical. Shall we turn to Iran? Because Donald Trump said in a social media post on Saturday that he would, quote, hit and obliterate Iran's power plants, beginning with the biggest one, if it didn't open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours. Now, today, this morning, Trump says he's postponing strikes on Iran power plants after, quote, productive talks on ending the war. Iran has now, their military HQ has put out a statement saying if U.S. attacks Iran's power plants, one, the Strait of Hormuz will be closed until damaged plants are rebuilt. Two, Israel's power, energy, and ICT infrastructure will be targeted. And three, power plants in Middle East countries hosting U.S. bases will be legitimate targets. And they seem to be denying that these talks are ongoing. Um, what is he? Is he just trying
Nice
to
to see
like?
diplomacy. Yeah.
I mean, there's theories that Trump is just trying to like keep the stock market afloat by, you know, reassuring people that there's at least until Friday when the markets close, he's not going to hit these power plants.
Well, there's always a reason anytime Trump tacos, it usually has something to do with the markets, and thinking that obviously there was blowback in two different directions. One he doesn't care about, one he would care about. The first would be the blowback from people who pointed out that attacking these power plants is very Putin-esque and is a war crime. Very specifically, targeting, civilian infrastructure that would cause this much suffering. I think very explicitly under international law, if you target, plants that supply water to civilian populations, that is considered literally a war crime. I don't think Donald Trump gives a shit about that. But also, people were pointing out that this is going to crash the markets. The markets have already been sinking, and if you do this, then you create a situation where it makes it that much harder for you to walk away from this because the damage will be much longer term. I mean, a lot of economists, including my good friend Justin Wolford, is saying, "Look, this is." Donald Trump could end this war tomorrow. He could simply declare victory and walk away, but the economic impact already is going to extend through 2026 into 2027, slowing the growth of the economy, the growth of the GDP, and fueling inflation. So, but destroying the power plants. I mean, think about this first of all. What this would do to the people of Iran, who he initially, at least sporadically, said that we were waging this war to liberate. I guess we don't give a shit about them anymore, do
Well, anything that would mess up the water supply
we?
in the Middle East would strike me. I mean, anywhere, obviously,
Yeah,
water is
right.
you can't last long without it, but I would think in the Middle East, it's even more dire than it might
Yeah.
be elsewhere. So it feels to me like this is becoming more that there is escalation, and Senator Lindsey Graham is now calling for Marines to seize Karg Island, Iran's main oil export hub, which lies about 20 miles off the coast of the mainland, declaring on Fox News, quote, "We did Iwo Jima, we can do this." I'm I'm led to, I was just recently reading about Iwo Jima. I think
Yeah,
it's the
me
only
too.
battle, where more Americans were lost than Japanese in a battle with Japan.
Well, according
Lindsay
to the World
said,
War II museums, it was a 36 days of fighting on the island. Nearly 7,000 U.S. Marines were killed.
"Hmm,
7,000. Another 20,000 were wounded. Marines captured 216 Japanese soldiers. The rest were killed in action. I'm not sure. So Lindsey Graham is citing that battle as a reason to go into Karg Island, put boots on the ground. I mean,
Here-
you just
here's
mentioned
what I
Lindsey's going through
tell
something.
here's what I tell President Trump. I can't do the accent.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But
Keep it up for a few more weeks. Take Karg Island, where all the resources they have to produce oil, control that island. Let this regime die on a vine, Graham told Shannon Bream of Fox Sunday. There's pushback. Marjorie Taylor Greene has long been a critic of Lindsey's, but now Anna Paulina Luna and Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace from South Carolina. And there is a primary against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. Um, I don't know. This is a person being pushed. The primary opponent's being pushed by like Steve Bannon and Breitbart. It is stunning to me that, remember, Lindsey Graham supported John McCain
Yep. They were
against George
close.
W. Bush, right?
Yes.
And so the fact that Lindsey Graham has been able to survive in South Carolina now for decades, um, despite all the stuff he's done, and criticizing Donald Trump, criticizing, supporting George W. Bush's opponent, and somehow this guy who doesn't really feel like he fits the state of South Carolina that much to me, um, somehow he manages to survive, and maybe he will again. But this is the opposite to. I'll give Christopher Caldwell some, some props here. It is kind of the opposite of what Donald Trump campaigned on. Now, you can't trust him. We've established you can't trust what Trump
Well,
says, but
exactly.
it is, he is now doing what Lindsey Graham wants him to do. Amazing.
Well, well, he is, and this is the reversal, which is true. I mean, there's no question about it that Donald Trump is listening to the exact kind of neocons that he ran against in 2016, very explicitly ran against. I mean, again, I think we've talked about this before, but don't underestimate how important that was in Donald Trump's victory, telling people that, I will never do what the Bush administration did with Iraq. I will never go in, engage in regime change or, embroil us in a quagmire or an endless war. And now basically he's ignoring the people who had been aligned with him throughout his entire term, the America Firsters, and I mean, they've sort of been thrown under the bus, and he is listening to people like Lindsey Graham. And by the way, Lindsey Graham is definitely going through something. I mean, he has had one unhinged, unfortunate comment after another. And I have to say, going back to 2016, since we always have these flashbacks, do you remember Lindsey Graham in 2016 when he was running
Hmm.
for president? He was funny, he was witty, he was smart. I mean, you go back and you look at that guy and you go, what has happened to him? And this again is part of the Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to, what happened to what happened to Lindsey Graham? Donald Trump broke his fill
Yeah.
in the blanks, but include his brain.
I wrote a really positive piece about Lindsey Graham for The Week back in
Hmm.
2016. But remember after January 6th, he said, I'm done with Trump," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then
Five minutes.
he started being hounded at the airport, at like Reagan National Airport.
Yeah.
Um, so let me do another callback to this Christopher Caldwell piece. He also said of Trump, he treats his allies worse than he treats adversaries. He does the same in domestic politics. So here he is, siding with Lindsey Graham, his former enemy, against his allies, the Tucker Carlsons of the world. Um, but it is a this is the kind of thing, like, you should have seen the way he treats America's allies and thought maybe he might treat his political allies the same way of him. Maybe he may throw you under the bus once you're no longer of use, the way he threw, I don't know, Canada, Denmark. Well, you saw this, Charlie. Denmark
I
was
did.
Danish soldiers were sent to Greenland equipped with explosives and blood supplies, underscoring
Body bags.
the seriousness of the contingency plans. According to officials who had knowledge of the plans, the soldiers never actually did anything to the airfields, but Denmark's consideration of such a scenario shows just how unnerved this Scandinavian country was in January.
Anne Applebaum has made the point that Americans still do not fully understand the trauma of that whole episode, not just in Denmark, but throughout Europe. And once again, we see it actually have consequences and playing out in real time. The fact that when Donald Trump picked up the phone and demanded, the allies step up to help him, he got that wall of no. So,
Yeah.
this turns out, for this the age old debate. Do we take him, seriously? Do we take him literally? Oh, come on, he's just trolling the world. Well, if that was just trolling, I don't think it was. It had real world consequences, and it will for a very long time. I mean, people like you and I were saying, you know what? When you break an alliance, when you basically, tear up 70 years of history, don't assume it's just going to snap back. don't assume that you're going to be able to press a button and that people who you have betrayed are going to trust you and come to your support. Donald Trump is learning right now. I don't know if he ever learns anything. In fact, I doubt that. Um, that we actually do need allies, and there is a certain condign consequence to him looking over his shoulder and saying, "Where are all the people that I need to be behind me?" Well, Donald, you've been pissing on them from a great height for the last year and a half. What did you think was going to happen?
And it's not just their failure to help open the Strait of Hormuz, but it's if you're Canada, you're like, well, I can't really trust America. They're threatening us. Maybe I need to be closer friends with China now too. Like we know China's bad, but they're farther away, and
They're
we
more
really can't.
reliable.
Yeah,
See, this is the thing that makes my head explode for people who say that, well, this is just a continuation of, Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. No, the notion that right now people around the world are looking at China as a more reliable partner than the United States of America is the world turned upside down. It is a nightmare scenario. Can we segue to something more positive? Because I'm
um, well, this is at least funny. It's not
okay.
more positive, but it's at least fun. I'm sure you saw this last week. We haven't spoken since, but when a Japanese reporter asked why Trump didn't tell his allies about the attack on Iran, and he turned to the Japanese prime minister and said, "Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor?"
See, I actually didn't think that was funny any more than the Japanese prime minister did. This is the Donald Trump's quip or his joke. Are you fucking kidding me? You're sitting there with the Japanese prime minister and you're bringing up Pearl Harbor. I mean, what's he going to do next? He's going to start joking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you know what? People are thinking, someday someone's going to ask him about that and he's going to say, yeah, I'm glad we did it. It was perfect. No. But anyway, this is a man who has no filter whatsoever and who feels that he can abuse and insult our allies to their face and that they will still, bend to his will. And by the way, there's a reason why he thinks it. There's a reason why megalomaniacs sometimes grow in their megalomania, which is that sometimes it works for him.
Oh
And
yeah,
that first year of his presidency, you know, he learned that he could insult, bully, threaten people, and they would cave into him, whether it's law firms or universities or media companies. So he's figuring, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to say whatever I want to anybody because it's kind of my way of humiliating you and showing, that that I have the big stick and that you don't.
yeah.
What a great moment of diplomacy. And I'm sure that Christopher Caldwell was deeply shocked to find out that Donald Trump, who knew that Donald Trump's character would have an effect on our foreign policy. Really, really, Christopher, smart guy.
Well, yeah. No one ever tells old rich guys, or really hot young women to shut up, that they don't know what they're talking about. And so I think they get lulled into this sense that that their jokes are funny. Do you remember who was the guy who helped fund the Daily Caller and he funded Charlie Kirk? Um, I can't remember his name. Super
Yeah,
rich
yeah,
guy,
okay.
actually very nice. But I remember he went on TV with Andrea Mitchell and told this joke about the way to avoid pregnancy is with an aspirin. You hold it between your knees. Foster Freeze was the guy's name. Very
Oh,
nice
wow.
guy,
Yeah.
but I'm sure he told that joke in his office and everyone
Right.
guffawed and thought it was hilarious. It just didn't go over quite as well on national TV. And I mean, just a normal rich guy always gets told all day long he's right, his jokes are funny. But if you're Trump, it's got to be that on like probably no one has told him in 50 years to shut up or that he's an idiot. And then he does things that all the smart, wise, cautious people say you shouldn't try, and sometimes it works, and that just fuels the insanity. And so, I mean, yeah, this is just like you know who the first people who have said no to him? Iran. Yeah, they're
Well,
basically the first people who have really,
well,
and
Denmark,
apparently,
yeah, Denmark said
apparently
no
the
to him,
Dave,
and
yeah,
Norway said no to him.
yeah,
No, but
they were, yeah,
this is an important point because people you have to understand, this bubble that these oligarchs are surrounded by, so that they believe that because they are rich, they are also incredibly smart and good looking and sexually potent as well. because why not? So if you've ever, spent time with them, you realize that they have supreme self-confidence and believe in their expertise, even if it has nothing to do with what made them wealthy. And then you have Donald Trump, who's almost in a Roman emperor style category, which is not only does he tell lame jokes that everybody laughs at, but then everybody in the room will tell him, Donald Trump, that is the best joke ever. No one has ever been as funny
Oh
as
yeah.
you. In fact, Donald Trump, you know, no one ever told a single joke until you came along. You saved humor. You are the wittiest man in the world. People do not understand how witty you are. Only Donald Trump has a sense of humor in the entire universe, and he just eats this shit up. Now, maybe there's part of him that despises the people who are sucking up to him like that, but I think he's gotten used to it. I mean, maybe in the beginning it was a little bit like, here, boy, have Lindsey
Hmm.
Graham, come and grovel at his feet, and would sneer at him. But at a certain point, this becomes your demand. This becomes the normal, and this is the world that he's in, which explains why there are so many miscalculations and what I think are politically irrational things that he's doing, like
That's
sending
why I
ICE
think
agents to
it's
the airport.
yeah. And that's why, Charlie, I don't know how it is at your household, but I can tell you in mine, my life and my career has been just a series of humiliations. I've got two teenagers. I am basically to them a glorified Uber driver with very strong political opinions. Like, there have been times where like I do Morning Joe and then literally I'm taking out the trash and doing
That
like
is genuinely
outs
humbling. Yeah.
yeah, and nobody's really that impressed. And I, but I just wonder if I don't know how many years could either of us go of people just telling us we were awesome before we would turn into monsters. Like there's, you know, if there weren't people telling, we all need to have someone telling you to shut up, and I should probably shut up right now.
No, we do. It's and quite frankly, there's a lot of quotations. Your real friends are the ones who are going to tell you, don't drive off the cliff. Don't act like an idiot. I actually ran into a guy recently who had written me a letter. There was a night when at some event where you know I was kind of an asshole to somebody.
Mm,
I acknowledge it, and he
it
writes me a
happens.
letter basically saying that I was.
Mm,
And Um, I ran into him, and this was like 2 years ago that this event happened. And I sat him down and I said, I just want you to know that I really appreciated that letter you wrote me because you were absolutely right. And I regarded it as the act of a friend to
yeah.
tell me that I had crossed the line and that I shouldn't do that, that I had, misunderstood something that was going on. And I said, I really appreciate that. We all need that. Do you remember the old story about the Roman emperors
Yeah.
when they would have a triumph? This is the opposite version of what I just said before, where when you would have a triumph, after a victory, and you'd ride in the chariot into Rome, and there was a slave who would always stand beside the conqueror and whisper in his ear, "Remember that you are mortal. Remember that you are
Mhm.
mortal." So it was built into the system that somebody reminded, really that don't let this go to your head. Now, obviously, it failed with the Roman emperors, with Caligula and Nero, etc. But there's nobody telling Donald Trump that, hey,
Mhm.
the ballroom, this is a shitty ballroom, bad optics at a time when the economy is turning south. I
There
don't know.
can't be. And ideally, there should be, you don't necessarily need a team of rivals, but say like a chief of staff,
Hmm.
who can. And I wonder, I don't know if Susie Wiles can tell him the truth and then just defer to him as soon as there's the pushback, or if she just can't. I get the feeling that people are telling him what he wants to hear because that's how they get promoted if they tell him what he wants to hear. And he never wants to hear any call. He doesn't want to hear, sir, let me tell you why that's probably a bad idea. Sir, let me explain to you why that's not going to work. He wants activity, action, acceleration, and he's the Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking. I think he just wants literally yes men, um, and maybe a yes woman as chief of
So
staff.
what is he? I'm interested in how he's absorbing the poll numbers that are coming in because it's like one ghastly poll after another. It's not just one. It's like boom, boom, boom.
Hmm.
So for example, looking at this one from The Argument, um, which is very much like the CBS poll. He's got he's 18 points underwater with all registered voters. 17% of his own supporters don't approve of him. His disapproval rate among Hispanics has exploded to over 60%. He's losing among whites. He's losing among 18 to 29 years old. Um, white with college, way underwater. Um, his numbers on the economy are absolutely terrible. I'm guessing that what's happening though is that people are afraid to give him all the bad news. So what they do is they feed him but you're at 98% among MAGA supporters.
Yeah.
You're still at 89% among white evangelical MAGA members. There was that stupid thing on CNN the other day where he's got 100% support among MAGA. Well, yeah, if you say I am a Trump supporter, and then you say, do you approve of Donald Trump? And you go, wow, it's like 98, 99, 100%. Well, yeah, what did you expect? I'm guessing, though, that those are the polls that they're giving him. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember this. It's a week or two old now, but Tucker Carlson, after the war, I think it was right after the war started, Tucker wanted to go back to the White House and try to meet Trump and say,
Yeah,
like, I think you need to just get out of there.
right.
And he's like, it's probably a waste of time. And according to Tucker, someone told him, it's don't waste your time because he's getting polling that shows him that this is popular. And he's watching Fox News, and the polls are telling him it's popular. And Tucker's like, well, what are you talking about? The polls are all horrible. This is the least popular war of all. And so I think that this fits totally into our, previous comments about they are telling him what he wants to hear. I don't, I don't know if he is fully aware. I think he is living in a state of delusion now, and it's of his own making. I don't want to give him the whole cop out. Like if only the czar knew,
No,
that's
no, no. He
BS.
doesn't want to know.
He's created this bubble and this sort of feedback mechanism or lack thereof. And so, but I think it's self perpetuating. And man, it could get him in way worse trouble than he's in
Well, it
now.
could get us in way worse trouble. I mean, this is dangerous stuff. And if given all the powers that he has, and that he will continue to have after the midterm
Mm.
elections, if he is in fact delusional, if we really do have a mad king, who has control
Yeah.
of the apparatus of the federal government, that is an extremely dangerous thing. And I keep coming back to over the weekend. Let's not sleep on the fact that he said, now that Iran is dead, the greatest enemy in the country is the Democrat Party. Well, what is your implication? Because you just bombed the shit out of and you killed the leadership of Iran. What are you suggesting would be the appropriate response to the Democrat Party or other
Yeah.
political critics and opponents? This
Well,
is
when it
this is
comes,
dangerous shit.
it is. And when it comes to like waging the war in Iran, and people keep talking about touching the hot stove, like Christopher Caldwell
Yeah.
finally touched the hot stove, and maybe people need to touch the hot stove. But there's this disease people can get, right? Where it's very dangerous because they don't know, they don't feel pain. And when you don't feel pain, uh, you touch the hot stove, but you don't know you've touched the hot stove.
Or
And
Donald
it's
Trump says, you go over there, you touch the hot stove, and if you scream or you jump back, then you're not loyal to me.
yeah, then
So
you're
you go over, you
right
touch
now.
the hot stove, you put your face on that hot stove, and you tell me that this is the greatest thing ever done by any president. I mean, this is the problem, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
But I think where you're going, we're not going to end positive because this is a really scary thought. But there's this sense right now. There's a little bit of Schadenfreude. I mean, nobody wants to root against America, but
no.
I'm willing to pay a little more gas prices if it really hurts Donald Trump's poll numbers. I will say that. So I think there's a sense that Donald Trump has, finally effed around and found out, and that his behavior at the polling is bad for him, and that he's now getting into this quagmire that's going to result in, if nothing else, a horrific midterm election where Democrats are now possibly going to take. I think they're now more likely than not to take the Senate as well as the House.
I don't know.
Um, but so that would be good if you're a Democrat. That would be good news. But what if then with Donald Trump, it's almost like, well, we want Ukraine to win, but if they start winning too much, Vladimir Putin could like launch a nuclear weapon. You know what I mean? It's a similar thing with Trump. Like, what if he feels backed into a corner and what happens when he loses
Oh,
the House and he
I
loses the
agree.
Senate? Then
Yeah.
what does he do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you still want him to do that. And by the way, I am not quite as bullish on the Democrats winning the Senate because, a couple of those races that I think ought to be more winnable. I think people are going to find out are kind of loosey in the football. I worry about Maine. I worry about Texas. Um, I think there's been a certain amount of denial about some of the baggage that James Pollarico has, and please do not kill the messenger here. I'm just saying they're about to dump $100 million in awful research. Um, and I think this is the danger of bubble. We're talking about the hermetically sealed world of Donald Trump. Um, this is also where I think the left needs to be cautious about the bubbles that they create, that they do not understand what landmines might be ahead, what issues people care about. I think there's this tendency to simply say that, well, none of these things are real, none of these things are important, these people don't know what they're talking about. Well, that's the opposite of actually being in touch with the electorate. So I'm not going to dwell on that.
Yeah.
By the way, political development that I just want to flag, but it's part of my irrational exuberance because I'm very intrigued by, speaking of Democrats, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, who wins as a Democrat in a deep red state, which makes him extremely interesting in and of himself. Somebody asked me a couple of months ago, well, who would you really like to see being the Democratic nominee? Of course, the correct answer is I don't get a say in this. I've learned that I don't get what I want. But if it was Andy Bashir, it would be pretty interesting to actually go back to a state that Democrats never win in and pick someone who wins. You see what he's doing now? He actually went into Ohio to rip J.D. Vance. He's positioning himself as the anti-J.D. Vance. Governor Andy Bashir on Saturday excoriated J.D. Vance as the most arrogant politician I've ever seen. Escalating a rivalry between the two potential 2028 presidential candidates. Um, and basically, he's going right at the hillbilly elegy fraud
Mm-hmm.
that J.D. Vance is. Ohio deserved a much better senator than him. We all deserve a much better vice president. Um, Beshear was widely seen as a likely 2028 presidential candidate, assailed the vice president as an out of touch leader who had made President Trump look comparatively humble. He argued that hillbilly elegy amounted to poverty tourism and traffic in this tired stereotype about the region. So I just want to flag this because I wasn't really sure that Bashir was going to make that run. I'm not saying that he's probably or likely to be the nominee, but pay attention, folks.
This is
See if he's
exactly what he needs to be doing if he wants to actually be in the
yeah,
conversation and be taken seriously. And I do think, I mean, look, there's a theory in politics, like go after John. Democrats nominated John Kerry because of his military credentials,
right,
and
right.
so go after those credentials. Like,
Yeah.
go after someone's strength, not their weak, or their perceived strength, not their weakness. And I do think with J.D. Vance, there is a vulnerability. I mean, on one hand, he's Mr. Populist, but he's married. He's got a kid named Vivek. Uh, he's Mr. Populist, but he's also Peter Thiel's bitch, um, who the big tech billionaire world. And he's kind of a phony. How many, like, hasn't he had like 5 different names? Like, his name isn't even JD Vance. That's weird. Right. And so I think that there is a vulnerability, but it could be better delivered by maybe by someone who really is from like Appalachia.
Well, okay. See, that's what's really interesting because Democrats once had a formula for getting elected to the presidency. So think about all of the Democrats that won the presidency from post World War II, won the presidency up until Barack Obama. What do they all have in common? LBJ. I'm leaving out John F.
Texas.
Kennedy here. Texas. But then people realized, what if we nominated somebody from Georgia, Jimmy Carter? What if
I
we
mean,
nominated somebody from Arkansas? What if we nominated another person from Texas, George Bush. So running from the South actually was working for the Democrats. And so Beshear is in many ways kind of a throwback to that. A Democrat from Kentucky. If I'm a Republican, that makes me very nervous. Makes me very nervous that it's not somebody coming from the coastal elites, not somebody, in fact, not somebody coming from Washington, because there was also that time when the conventional wisdom was that governors were stronger candidates than senators because they had executive experience, but they also could run as outsiders. So that's where maybe we are going back to that. Let's look to the
Mhm.
governors and maybe look to the South a little bit. And when you start
I
doing
like
that,
that.
Andy Beshear
I'm
keeps coming up.
I'm not sure Kentucky's the South, but point well
Borders.
taken. He has to. He has to. The one problem would be the knock is if he's boring in this attention economy. But hey, if he can go after JD Vance, that solves that problem. That's a big part of. That would be a big part of the solution. So I am.
Well,
Uh,
yeah,
I'm open to. I'm very. You know. I'm wide open to this because I mean we go down the list, right? You've got Kamala Harris, that's a non-starter.
yeah.
Uh, Gavin Newsom, again, another Californian, maybe too slick, too much of a politician. Certainly good at the attention economy. You got Senator from Arizona, Mark
There you go.
Kelly.
Duke
You've
Senator,
got
yeah.
Josh Shapiro up in
Shapiro.
Pennsylvania. You've got the Governor Pritzker of Illinois. Um, but nobody else checks that box, Charlie, of the whole rural, let's say rural, maybe
Yeah,
thing,
rural,
the way
right.
that. So he may have that. He might have that lane to himself for one thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a certain amount of delusion that Tim Walz was going to provide that sort of rural, rural coding or whatever that was, and that
Yeah.
turned out not to be a success. And that what we ought to remind ourselves and all of our listeners. In fact, there are, probably some viewers and listeners to us right now who are political junkies who have not really heard much about Andy Beshear at all. But the caution is also lots of people look good on paper until the Klieg lights go on and they get on that stage. Lots of people who are very, very plausible presidential candidates until the presidential campaign starts. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you want to have a vigorous primary is to
Yeah.
find out, who's for real and who's pretend. And it's always interesting because, and I've said this before to you, I mean, I am old enough to remember when the great hope of the Republican Party was
George
Fred
Allen.
Thompson.
Oh.
Okay, George, yeah, Fred Thompson. Remember, wait till Fred Thompson gets in the race. Everybody
Yeah.
knows great. He's an actor, and what that thing fizzled out in like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And I could come up with a pretty long list of guys that look great on paper, get into the race and fall flat on their face. So
Yeah.
that's true of, frankly, everybody in the field at the moment.
Fair point. I do think Bashir. He's been around a long time. But I don't know if he hasn't been in the deep end. You know, when you run for president,
True.
the spotlight's much brighter. So he's definitely had time to warm up, adjust to the water. He's not Sarah Palin being airdropped into a campaign, or even Barack Obama, who needed multiple debates before he became the. He could give that great speech at the convention, but in terms of being able to debate, think on his feet, that kind of thing, he really ramped up over the course of like 18 or 20 debates with Hillary Clinton, something like that. So anyway, yeah, I'm Beshear curious. Maybe he'll come on one of our podcasts and we can
Yeah, just
take it to the
put
next
him on
level.
your map. Put him on your map. That's all I ask.
Awesome, my friend. Anything else before we ride off into the sunset today?
Well, one piece of good news for the First Amendment, which we talked about a lot, the Pentagon's limits on press access were found to be unconstitutional. U.S. judge rules. Federal judge blocked the Trump administration's restrictive Pentagon press access policy, which threatens journalists with being branded security risks if they seek information not authorized for public release. So I'm not surprised by this, but once again, push back to Pistol Pete's attempt to gag the media. Another judicial defeat for this administration. So let's notch that as a win for the Constitution.
Amen, brother. All right, everybody. Rate, review, subscribe. Become a paid subscriber if you're so inclined. we would support it. Charlie, if all goes well, I will be doing this with you from somewhere else, a spring break with my kids and my fam. If I get through security, otherwise, I'll see you right back here.
Well, I'm actually planning on flying over the weekend, and I'm hoping to be in Dallas, but right now, every time I open up my phone and you look at the pictures of the airports, I'm going, I might get there, I might not get there, or if I get there, I might be there for a very, very long time. So we'll see. So we'll
I'm
talk
going to
next
pull
week.
out all the stops of all of my expertise, my travel skills to try to make this as painless as possible. So, all right, my friend. Hopefully, good Lord willing, we'll be back here next week. And everybody, thanks for watching. Charlie Sykes, thanks, man.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Lewis.